Please.
Thank you very much, Bernd. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I hope you've seen the vote. And putting it in context of other trade votes, it is indeed exceptional to see such broad support from all sides of the House through the middle behind this update of the export controls of torture and death penalty goods and services. I think today shows that when the EU works together, strong mandate from the European Parliament, strong and effective cooperation between the three institutions, we can really set global standards. So today we send a message to people who are suffering from torturing and the death penalty. I think we must never forget for who we make this legislation. We send a signal to countries from Saudi Arabia to Iran, from Egypt to the United States, that the EU will continue to seek the abolishment of the death penalty and an end to torture and other human rights violations. Trade is an essential tool in the EU's foreign policy toolkit. And I think we've seen how we can make it work today. I'll briefly mention a few of the essential updates, upgrades, whatever you want to call them, that today's regulation enables. The work we've done together builds on a 2014 update of the list of goods that are either banned or require additional assessment before being exported. And in this regulation, we worked on the procedures that are under greater scrutiny. So I'm very happy that advertisement, marketing, display and sales on trade fairs of these torture and death penalty goods is no longer allowed. That transit is under greater scrutiny for banned goods, and also when a customs employee finds something suspicious, it's much easier to report and to take measures. It is easier for the European Commission to take measures when it's necessary, and we've looked closely into information sharing with the national authorities who are responsible for implementing UN treaties against torture, but also between the EU institutions in order to allow for flexible and swift updates where necessary. These are only a few highlights. I don't want to make it too technical, and I know you may have some questions, but let me thank everyone involved in this work again, particularly civil society organizations, human rights organizations, and people who from all over the world have looked to us in the European Parliament, to us in the EU, to raise the bar. And it shows that trade can help raise the bar for human rights, and I'm very happy because both topics are close to my heart.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Also, I want to say a few words from the part of the Commission. I am also very proud today. This is a piece of legislation where we show the world that we're not only talking, we're actually trying to act. And the European institutions, when we have worked together like this, we can deliver results. Someone who has been promoting a more value-based trade policy, it's of course a great day. We are talking about here very concrete issues. We are talking about lethal drug injection systems. We're talking about electric chairs. We're talking about gas chambers. We're talking about lethal poison, shock belts, spiked batons. These things can be exported, and they have no place, of course, in civilized society. But through concrete actions, it will be much more difficult for states to continue to import or export these issues in a number of countries all over the world. Of course, where we have death penalties such as Saudi, Iran, China and others, but also in the United States, because we condemn those practices wherever they happen. And I really want to thank the rapporteur who led the Parliament's delegation together with Chairman Lange in the trialogue. We had good cooperation between the European Parliament and the Commission, and we were able to insert quite a few of your amendments to the original proposal, and I'm very happy for that. And we have mended some of the loopholes, the promotion of these goods and fairs. Actually, these products that I mentioned appear on trade fairs. They are in catalogues by European companies selling this. And this is, of course, deeply shocking, and they have no place in Europe, so that loophole is now shut. And as the rapporteur said, we have also installed a system where the Commission can act quickly in order to make sure that new products, because things change so rapidly, that we have a sort of urgency procedure to ban new products as well. We are also banning the transit of products. This was also a loophole that we have corrected. And this will transform the old regulation, that is 11 years old now, to a robust export control regime where we take responsibility and where we show that export input, that is fine, but it has to be within limits, and this is the value. So we send a powerful signal today. Many citizens have been following this, many NGOs, many engaged individuals, and I think they have a reason to be happy today. So thank you again for the good cooperation we've had with the Parliament.
And now for the questions. Please tell us where you're from and who do you want to answer the question.
Bonjour, en français.
Good morning. Good afternoon, sorry, in France. I'm from the Alsace News in Strasbourg. Could you give us some examples of some of the products covered by this legislation? We're talking about strengthening some legislation from 2005. And I imagine you've been able to see the specific effects since 2005 and where the shortcomings were in the existing legislation. So could you give us an example of specific effects and what this will now mean that you can avoid?
Was the question directed to me or someone? Everyone? Okay. Thank you for the question. I think it's important to distinguish between two steps in the update of this law. In 2014, the list of products was amended significantly, defining categories of tools that are banned. So think about, electric chairs or certain beds that tie down people, certain devices that, tie down people, can shock people with electric waves. I mean, the most gruesome of materials you can imagine. But there's also a category that consists of products where it depends on who uses them to see a risk or to see no risk at all. And of course, we have to be careful not to bring completely legitimate business into trouble with over-bureaucratizing, over-complicating the procedures. So the most pertinent example is probably medicine. Certain narcotics that pharmaceutical companies, of which Europe has many, are making, can be used for bringing someone under anesthesia in a perfectly legitimate, perhaps life-saving operation, surgery, but in a different dose, used not by a doctor but by a prison system. It can be used to actually lethally inject someone. So it can be used to inflict the death penalty. Now, we have found a way to make sure that we look at products, that we look at destinations, and that we look at services between the products and the destinations, such as the marketing, in brochures, on trade fairs, even when, let's say, a trade fair in France would have a Chinese broker of products seeking to sell to someone from yet another country, let's say in the Middle East. So even if there would be a brokering, as we call it in technical terms, between a vendor and a buyer from third countries on European soil, this is no longer allowed. So what we're doing is raising the bar of the threshold that companies need to meet. We're increasing both the precision and the flexibility of addressing the problematic trade in these tools, while we've really sought to avoid hindering perfectly legitimate trade. It's also a different issue if, let's say, what do you call it, a taser is sold to police forces in a country with the rule of law, or whether it is sold to countries where the rule of law does not exist. So this is all about precision, updating to newest developments in the world, and raising the bar to meet the highest human rights standards.
Catherine Fiore, EU reporter. I think you've mostly answered my question, but just is there a list associated with this? So, for example, things that are quite repressive, like riot gear and things like that. Well, depends on the circumstances and who's using it. So, do you have a list of countries where you cannot sell, say, riot gear. I don't know.
So the list basically already exists. It is what we refer to as annexes. So there are goods in Annex 1 and 2 and 3, and depending on what annex they fall in, different measures are needed. So one category is banned altogether. That makes it relatively clear. A second category is multiple purpose. And so it depends on the category of goods whether there is an extra measure of control or assessment of whether the destination is legitimate and without risk or presents risks. And this combination of product and destination determines what happens next, whether there's a green light or a red light, to be short.
Can I just complement your question? Do we know anything about the efficiency? Actually, last time we revised the list, there were a few medical substances that were prohibited, and they have been used formally for executions in the United States. They are no longer allowed to be exported, and the American Bar Association and several civil rights organizations confirm that that has contributed to the decrease of executions in the United States, actually, and has led to debate on these issues. So it has had an effect, and it has been confirmed by many, many people. For instance, in the US, where we have an open debate on this, the effect in other countries who are not democracies are, of course, more difficult to really map, but it has really had an effect.
Is there any more questions? If that's not the case, then the press... one more question? Yeah. Follow-up question, please.
Oui, pardon. Merci.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to react to the question my colleague raised. Do you have any specific examples of countries that are marked down as countries toward which certain products cannot be exported? You talked about Saudi Arabia, for example. Now, in the text available to us, we don't have the annexes, unfortunately. But for Saudi Arabia, say, is it clearly stated that certain goods or products that might be marketed, sold to France or Canada, cannot be marketed or sold to Saudi Arabia as of the EU? Have you any examples?
So I apologize because I don't have the annexes here either. They're very long and very technical, and it's important that the competent authorities work with them. But oftentimes there are different sanction regimes or licensing requirements in place. There can be UN sanctions, which of course top everything we're talking about today. There can be EU sanctions, which ban the export of military tools, but also dual-use goods. This is often the case with countries now. For example, there's sanctions on dual-use items with Russia in place. But with Syria, it's broader categories. So these are political decisions that have to be made. What we have looked at today are more the assessments of certain goods and the licenses they need to, so the company that seeks to export, the question in which cases they need to obtain a license, which is basically more of a tailor-made assessment of whether this product in a certain circumstance can be abused. I mean, largely speaking, we consider the United States to be one of the most open societies in the world, although, of course, there are some human rights concerns, and the death penalty still applies. So only in very specific cases would this raise questions. Other countries, like many countries in the Middle East or North Africa, for example, or in other parts of the world where we know of systematic human rights abuses and torture, these products would be looked at through a different lens. The product doesn't change, but the destination changes the way in which we have to act on the European level. So it's really like a sum of different elements that leads to the equation of whether the license will be granted or not. And yeah.
In der Tat ist ja die Frage des Produktes dann eine ganze.
This how it's applied. The question, for example, electroshocks. which can be used for self-defense. But in African countries, they're used systematically for torture. And that's taken account of in the law. And also publicity. It was possible to have in catalogues thumb cuffs, thumb screws, that sort of things, that can't be done. We can't accept advertising of such clear products which are clearly used for torture in certain countries.
Okay, if you don't have more questions, then the press conference is over. Thank you very much for your attention.